Tuesday, October 14th, 6:38 in the evening. I remember the exact minute because I was sitting in my truck outside the pharmacy, waiting on a prescription refill, when my phone lit up. I'd just come from dropping my brother off at the VA clinic for his monthly checkup, and I was tired in that particular way a man gets tired after spending all day being strong for somebody else. I had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything I thought I understood about my own family was about to come apart in my hands like wet paper. I'm going to tell you what I saw on those cameras that evening, and I'm going to tell you what I did about it, because I didn't raise my voice, I didn't slam a single door, and by the time it was over, I didn't need to. Before I get into it, if you're listening to this in your truck, on your porch, or on a break at work, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from tonight, friend. And if you believe a person's loyalty ought to be paid back, and quiet betrayal ought to never win the day, go on and hit that like button before we get started. Now let me back up, because you're not going to understand why a phone call from a woman named Dorothy Wallace put the fear of God in me unless you understand who she was to my family first. Dorothy had been coming to our house 3 days a week for going on 12 years. She started the year my grandson Marcus was born, back when my daughter was still living with us in the house on Chestnut Hollow Road outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, trying to get back on her feet after her first husband left her with a baby and a stack of bills. Dorothy wasn't just somebody who came through and ran a vacuum and left. She was the one who noticed Marcus had an ear infection 3 days before anybody else caught it, because she said his cry sounded different than his hungry cry. She was the one who drove clear across town in the snow to bring my late wife Ruth her blood pressure medicine the week Ruth broke her hip, back before we lost her to the cancer 4 years ago. Dorothy never once called in sick in 12 years unless she was flat on her back with something serious, and even then she'd call and apologize for it like she'd let us down somehow. She kept a little green notebook in the pocket of her apron, the same one, year after year, and in it she wrote down things nobody ever asked her to write down. Which drawer held Marcus's asthma inhaler? What day the trash went out? Which of my medications I tended to forget on a Sunday? Little things. I didn't understand until later just how much those little things were going to end up mattering. My name is Walter Boone. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years running a heating and air conditioning business out of a little shop on Magnolia Avenue, the kind of business that never made me rich, but it put my daughter through nursing school and it kept a roof over our heads that didn't leak. My weakness, and I'll own up to it plain, because there's no sense dressing it up, is that once I decide to love somebody, I hand them the keys and I quit checking the locks. I trust my own blood the way I trust the sun to come up. I signed over half my business to my son-in-law, my daughter's second husband, a man named Roy Pruitt, without hardly reading past the signature line, because he told me family don't need contracts between them. And Lord help me, I believed him. That Tuesday evening, I'd just come from the VA clinic with my younger brother Curtis, who'd had a rough go of it since Vietnam, and still needed somebody to sit with him during his appointments. My daughter Angela, Roy's wife, had told me that morning she wasn't feeling well and was going to stay home and rest. I didn't think twice about it. I never thought twice about much when it came to Angela. I was sitting in the pharmacy parking lot on Kingston Pike when my phone rang, and it was Dorothy. Her voice wasn't its usual self. There was a shake running clean through it, like a plate about to crack down the middle. "Mr. Boone," she said, "don't you come home right now. Please, you go on and check your cameras first." I asked her what in the world was wrong. She wouldn't tell me. She just kept saying, "Please, Mr. Boone, check the cameras." And then she said she had to go, and the phone went dead in my hand. I sat there a second with my heart doing something strange in my chest, and then I pulled up the security app on my phone. I'd had those cameras put in 2 summers back, after somebody broke into my tool shed and cleaned out about $4,000 worth of equipment. Most days I forgot they were even running. I opened the app with my thumb shaking, and the kitchen camera came up first. There was my son-in-law Roy sitting at my kitchen table, in my house, the house I built with my own 2 hands back in 1989. Across from him sat my daughter Angela, but it wasn't Angela's face on my mind for that first second, because standing right there next to Roy, leaning over his shoulder and pointing at something on the table, was a man I recognized the second I saw him. Dale Sutter. My own second cousin, The man who'd stood up as best man at my wedding to Ruth 40 years earlier. The man who used to sit on my porch with a glass of sweet tea every Sunday of my life, practically since we were boys, running barefoot through the same cornfield. Spread out across my kitchen table between the three of them were papers, a whole stack of them, and a manila folder I recognized right off. The same folder I kept my property deed and my business paperwork locked up inside my gun safe in the back bedroom. I turned the sound up on my phone as far as it would go. The picture was clear, but the audio was thin and crackly, the way those cameras always are. But I heard enough. I heard Dale say the word power of attorney, not once but twice. And then I heard Angela laugh. And it wasn't her real laugh, not the one I raised her to have. It was short, and it was cold. And she said, "Daddy won't even know what happened till it's already done and signed." I sat in that pharmacy parking lot for what felt like an hour but was probably closer to 15 minutes, not moving a muscle. A woman pulled her minivan into the spot next to me, went inside, came back out with a bag of something, and drove off, and I never once looked up. I was watching my own daughter's hand resting easy on my son-in-law's arm, while my second cousin leaned over a stack of paper with my name typed across it in places I never put it there myself. I want to tell you something, and I want you to understand it, because it matters to everything that comes after. I did not explode. I did not start the truck and go tearing home to bust that door open. Something inside of me went dead calm, the kind of calm that settles over a pond right before a bad storm rolls in, not after one's already passed through. I called Dorothy back. She picked up on the first ring, like she'd been sitting there holding that phone in her hand the whole time, waiting. "How long has this been going on, Dorothy?" I asked her. "I can't say for certain, Mr. Boone," she told me, and her voice was still shaking some. I asked her why on God's green earth she'd risk her job over this, coming to me the way she had. She was quiet a moment, and then she said something I have turned over in my mind every single night since. She said, "Mr. Boone, you have paid me fair and on time for 12 years, even the month your Ruth passed, and you forgot to pay half your own bills. Somebody under this roof owes you the truth." I didn't go home that night. I sent Angela a text saying I was going to stay over at Curtis's place, since he'd had a hard day at the clinic, and I didn't like leaving him alone with his thoughts, which wasn't a lie exactly, it just wasn't the whole truth either. I checked myself into the Baymont off the interstate, sat down on the edge of that bed, and I read through everything Dorothy had written in that green notebook. She'd taken pictures of every page and sent them to my phone, dates, times, a mention of some document called a durable power of attorney, a mention of moving my business accounts, the ones that fed my grandson's college fund, into something Roy called a restructured holding company before. In Dale's own words that she'd overheard, "The old man gets any sharper about it." Here is what I did not do that night. I did not call my daughter screaming. I did not call the sheriff's department in a rage. I sat with it. I let myself feel every bit of how deep that cut went, because pretending it didn't hurt would have made a fool of me twice over, once for missing it all these years, and once for rushing past it now. Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock sharp, I called a lawyer I'd known since he was a boy, playing shortstop on my nephew's Little League team, a man named Harold Meeks, who'd handled every contract for my HVAC business for going on 15 years. I told him everything I'd seen and heard. He went quiet on the other end of the line for a good long moment, and then he asked me one question that turned the whole thing over in my mind, like a plow turning up soil. He said, "Walter, whose name is actually on the deed to Chestnut Hollow, and whose name is on the majority ownership of Boone Heating and Air?" "Mine. Only mine." I'd meant to add Ruth's name to the deed for years before she passed, and never got around to it out of nothing but plain procrastination, and I'd never once gotten around to adding Angela's name to the business either, though Roy had asked about it more than a few times over the years, always real casual, always like it wasn't a big deal. That morning I understood, maybe for the first time in my life, that my own foot-dragging had ended up saving me. I did not feel one bit like celebrating. I felt sick to my stomach, because it meant what was sitting on that kitchen table wasn't some misunderstanding. It was fraud, plain and simple, already in motion. I spent the next 11 days living like a man, watching a thunderhead build up over the ridge, counting the seconds between the lightning and the thunder that was bound to follow. I didn't let on to Angela that I knew one single thing. I kept coming around like always, bringing Curtis by for Sunday dinner, kissing my daughter on the top of her head the way I'd done since she was small. I noticed her hiding her phone screen when I walked into a room, something I used to wave off as nothing, and now I saw with a whole different set of eyes. Roy came by the house twice that week, claiming he was there to fix the gutter, except both times I wasn't at the shop like they figured. I was parked 2 streets over in my old truck, watching his car sit in my driveway on the camera feed on my phone, feeling something in my chest I never want to feel again as long as I live. Harold worked fast, and he worked quiet. On the 4th day, he found out the notary, who'd stamped one of those power of attorney drafts, had her license suspended 6 months back for the exact same kind of business. On the 6th day, he turned up a second account, opened under Angela's maiden name, with a handful of small deposits already sitting in it, just enough to make it look, on paper, like an account that had been there for years, nothing that would raise an eyebrow at a glance. On the 7th day, I moved, and I moved quiet. I met with Harold and I restructured the ownership of Boone Heating and Air into a trust, but not the kind of trust Roy and Dale were counting on. I named my grandson Marcus as the primary beneficiary, with an ironclad clause that locked out any transfer of ownership without his direct say-so once he turned 25, which was a full 9 years off, managed until then by Harold as trustee, a man I trusted with my life. I sold the Chestnut Hollow property outright at fair market value to a young couple Harold found through a colleague of his, and I took part of that money and did something I'd been meaning to do for years and never had, set up a standing account in Dorotha Wallace's name, fully funded, along with a letter making it plain that no matter what happened between me and my daughter, her job and her home were never again going to hang on somebody else's word. I didn't do any of it out of spite toward Angela. I did it because I finally understood that what was mine needed to belong, on paper, to somebody who had actually earned the right to it. The phone calls started coming on the 8th day. Angela noticed the Chestnut Hollow listing had gone up online under a name she didn't recognize. 9 missed calls that first afternoon. By that evening, it was up past 20. Roy called twice, though I didn't know the third number that kept ringing until Harold told me Dale had started calling from his daughter's cell phone trying to get through to me. By the next morning, there'd been better than 30 missed calls between the 3 of them combined. She had no idea yet just how much I'd already moved, but she was fixing to find out. Saturday, October 25th, 7 o'clock in the evening, I finally picked up. I told her to come on out to the house, alone. She showed up not 20 minutes later, already talking a mile a minute before she was even through the front door, already telling me I had it all wrong, that whatever I thought I'd seen on that camera wasn't what it looked like at all. I didn't say a word. I just walked to the counter and I laid out the bank records first. Then the letter about the notary's suspended license. Then the trust paperwork, already signed, already filed, with Marcus's name printed right there in black and white. My voice never once rose through any of it, and I want you to understand something, friend. It didn't need to. She stopped dead in the middle of her own sentence the second she saw that trust paperwork. Her face did something I had never once seen it do in 38 years of being her father. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like watching a house's foundation give way underneath it while the roof was still trying its best to hold its shape up above. "You didn't have any right to do this," she said, real quiet now. "I had every right," I told her. "It's my name on every piece of it. It always was." She asked me, even quieter than before, if there was any way back from where we stood. I told her the plain truth. I told her I wasn't out to punish her for the rest of her days, but I also wasn't about to sit here and pretend the last 11 days hadn't happened. The house would be sold, and it already was. The business was protected in a way neither she, nor Roy, nor Dale could ever lay a hand on again. Whatever the 3 of them decided to do from here on out, they'd be doing it without one dime of what used to be mine. She left that house that night, and I heard through people who still talk to us both that Roy's own contracting business took a hit not long after, once word got around about forged documents, which draws exactly the kind of attention nobody wants, even when the man they tried to rob decides against pressing charges out of what little was left of family feeling. I never lifted a finger to make any of that happen on my own. I never had to. I still live outside Knoxville, in a smaller house now, closer to Curtis so I can look after him proper. Doretha still comes by 3 days a week, though these days it feels less like an employer and a woman who works for him, and more like two people who've earned each other's trust the hard way, which is rarer than it ought to be in this world. She still keeps that same green notebook in her apron pocket, and every time I catch sight of it, I think back on that phone call outside the pharmacy that started this whole thing. I won't sit here and tell you I've forgiven everything, because I haven't, and I'm not in any hurry to get there. What I will tell you is that I quit needing one single thing from Angela or Roy or Dale to feel like my own life belonged to me again. That happened the day I signed my grandson's name onto that trust, not the day anybody came around apologizing, because to this day, not one of them really has. If there's one thing I hope you carry away from this, friend, it's that loyalty hardly ever shows up with a brass band and fireworks. Sometimes it's a woman with a green notebook tucked in her apron pocket, willing to put her own paycheck on the line just to tell an old man the truth he needed to hear. Pay close attention to the people who show up steady and quiet, year after year, long before you ever needed them to prove a thing. And if this story meant something to you tonight, go on and subscribe, and tell me down in the comments, who's the Doretha in your own life? The one who told you the truth when the easy thing would have been to just stay quiet and mind their own business. I surely would like to hear about them.